The modern capitalist system has led to prosperity. More and more people have more and more things. The modern anti-capitalism of the present time is a critique of capitalism that it gives us too much.
They think that the problem with capitalism now is actually that it's giving out too many rewards en masse to ordinary workers. And what they want instead, and this is often very explicit actually, is a much more austere, simple kind of lifestyle in which the mass consumption, the consumption choices of the great bulk of the population are controlled or even prohibited.
You have to consume less, you have to holiday less, you have to drive less, you have to eat less, and so on.
It seems that what upsets many environmentalists is not the failure, but rather the success of capitalism in producing an abundance of affordable goods for the masses.
Ordinary working people, for once, we've arrived at a point in history, in the Western world at least, where mass manufacture has allowed them cheap clothes, cheap food, cheap furniture. Therefore, you get a clash when affluent environmentalists express their disdain for mass consumption. People going on those big, huge cruise ships, it's like thousands of them. It's like, what are they doing? Oh my God, there's all those cruise ships, like ruining Venice, you know, ruining all our beautiful... We own them, don't we? They're not... What are they going there for?
What you have here is a classic example of class hypocrisy and self-interest masquerading as public-spirited concern. You could take these kind of green socialists much more seriously if they lived off-grid, they cut their own consumption down to the minimum, they never flew. Instead, you get constant talk about how human consumption is destroying the planet, but the people making all this talk show absolutely no signs of reducing their own.
What environmentalists call degrowth is being achieved by the trashing of our conventional energy and transport systems, and the forced introduction of expensive and unreliable alternatives. Already this is having the desired effect on industrial manufacturing, which is straining under the burden of punitive green taxes and regulation and higher energy prices.
The people behind the climate alarm couldn't give a damn about manufacturing. They have nothing to do with it. They don't know people who work in manufacturing, whose jobs and lives depend on it. They're not excited by industry or industrial progress. They explicitly want to shut it down.
Kisii, Kenya, East Africa. According to many leading environmentalists, the world's poorest people should not aspire to the lifestyle of people in the first world. The planet will not cope. Grace Nyakananda is one of the many Africans who do not have electricity or gas to cook with or heat their homes. The resulting indoor smoke from burning wood and dry dung is the deadliest form of pollution in the world. For millions, the cause of lung disease, blindness, and early death. It's not just cheap, reliable electricity that Africa needs. Agricultural productivity here is incredibly low. Increasing it takes fossil fuels to make fertilizer and drive tractors and other farm machinery. Jasper Mashogu is a farmer.
Each and every African wants to develop, and improving agriculture is one of the easiest ways to do that. Agriculture is tightly tied to fossil fuels that the Western nations are saying we should not have access to.
Around a third of the food produced in Africa rots before it ever reaches the mouths of consumers. To prevent this terrible waste, Africa needs plastic packaging, refrigerated lorries, and good roads. All are opposed by Western environmentalists. All come with industrial development. All rely on affordable fossil fuel energy. Diarrhea from drinking dirty water still kills hundreds of thousands of African children. But clean water requires large industrial water purification plants and a modern water supply network. And this will come only with cheap energy.
I think it's pretty obvious that The West has got what it has because of fossil fuels. When people say Africa doesn't need fossil fuels, I wonder. I don't think they want what's best for us. They don't want us to develop, and that means we continue being starving, we continue being poor. Most people don't know what climate change is. They don't care. They want food on their table. They want to beat poverty. They want to beat hunger. They need money to better their lives. They want to flourish. That's just it.
When they use the word sustainable development, they're talking about no development. Exactly. I mean, the point is that, you know, to develop sustainably means not to use too much energy, not to use too much carbon, you know, net zero, the idea that you mustn't use too many resources, the fact you mustn't produce enough consumer goods because consumption is bad. So ultimately, you know, the idea of development is out the window.
The Greens think the Africans should never use their resources the way the Europeans or the Americans or the Canadians or the Australians have used theirs. They are also in favor of punitive taxes, border taxes on any African country that wants to export their goods to Europe if they do use their resources. So that sums up the ethical ruthlessness and depravity of the Green agenda.
But climate alarmists have a problem. Many countries in Africa and across Asia are simply ignoring the environmentalist demands of Western governments and international agencies. Communist China is estimated to be building an average of 2 new coal power plants a week. China now uses more coal than the rest of the world combined.
Which is one of the reasons why this whole climate agenda is falling apart, because the rest of the world is not cutting emissions, is not moving to renewables.
In the West, too, for many people, climate alarmism is wearing thin.
Ordinary people are not stupid. They have seen one ridiculous claim after another fail over and over. What this does is leave people with a profound and justified cynicism about what the scientific establishment says and about what the government says.
To fix the climate crisis, we're told, we must give up our cars. We must pay more for fuel, heating, clothes, food, fly less, limit where we go. This attack on mass travel, mass tourism, mass consumption holds little appeal to the masses.
People have started to realise it's going to cost them a lot of money to simply live the lives that they were leading, that they want to lead. And as soon as that started to happen, I could see people in the United Kingdom who had previously been indifferent to environmentalism suddenly think, how dare they do that, right? How dare they try and take away what we consider to be not luxuries, but necessities.
The whole policy of sustainability is about restraint. It's about restriction, it's about doing less. And that, obviously, for most people is anathema to their everyday needs.
The fact that there is actually an ideological movement of people who think that cheap mass production of whether it's houses or anything else is a problem. I mean, for God's sake, no wonder people become disdainful of the kind of middle-class outlook of environmentalism. But that is literally what people say. How can we stop people buying cheap things in shops?
When climate protesters climbed onto an underground train in London's East End, they were not cheered on by working commuters. They were hurled abuse, pelted, angrily dragged off the train, and received rough treatment on the platform.
If you were to go into a pub frequented mainly by what the Americans call blue-collar workers, you will find that being sceptical about climate change policy is not going to get you thrown out. Quite the contrary, somebody will probably buy you a drink. They can tell that behind all the talk about climate emergency, climate crisis, what there actually is an animus and a hostility towards them, their lifestyle, their beliefs, and a desire to change it by force if necessary.
Punitive and restrictive policies, carried out both in the name of climate change and COVID, have sparked protests in Britain, Canada, and other Western countries. anti-establishment politicians and movements are gaining support.
What they underestimated was the fury that this would meet with ordinary people who just say, you can't do this, so you suddenly get this new movement.
Many working people are not merely sceptical, but positively angry about the climate alarm and all that flows from it. There is a suspicion, or perhaps realization, that climate change is an invented scare, driven by self-interest and snobbery, cynically promoted by a parasitic, publicly funded establishment hungry for ever more money and power. An assault on the freedom and prosperity of the rest of us.